Hey, this is Dave from MetalEpidemic.com. Thank you for checking out our YouTube video. Please feel free to hit the subscribe button below if you like this type of content, and we hope you enjoy the review. What is up, Dave, Duncan, Kyle? What is wrong with you?
What is up, Dave? I'm fine, Dave.
Do you want me to leave a longer gap? I can leave a longer gap there if you want.
You just say, what's up, people?
No. What is up?
It's because he's talking into a mirror.
Dave, Duncan, Kyle, back from Metal Epidemic for another album review. For this review, Duncan, Kyle and I have been checking out the new album from Swiss avant-garde metal band Zeal Ardor. The band's new self-titled album was released on February 11th via MVKA. So, initially a solo project formed in 2013 by Manuel Ganu, a Swiss-American musician. Zeal Ardor expanded into a full band around 2016, just before their debut album Devil Is Fine. This self-released release is the band's third full-length album, which comes almost 4 years since Stranger Fruit from 2018.
Fucking bizarre. I saw them on that tour.
Yeah.
And that did not feel like 4 years ago.
Yeah.
So, like, even a wee bit. Jesus.
This release was recorded by Mark Obrist and Manuel Ganu at Hutch Sounds and mastered by Will Putney at
Of course it
Graphic
was.
Nature Audio.
This got Putney's fingers all over it.
Yeah. All songs were written by the multilingual frontman Ganu, with some German lyrics intermixed with the English. So, Zeal Ardor, I really only got into Zeal Ardor on that second album, on Stranger Fruit. The first album was a bit of a struggle for me, not gonna lie.
What the fuck, Dave?
That first album is like, it's very experimental. The production as well is very, almost kind of lo-fi, which,
Because he was aiming for a more black metal feel.
yeah, and that's fine. It kind of put me off, to be honest. Stranger Fruit, on the other hand, felt like a bit of a turning point for me, and I think it was probably the album that put Zeal Ardor on the map.
100%.
It's it's still quite avant-garde in places, but I felt like it had more of an idea of what type of artist he was trying to be, and I think it did have a more balanced sound. It wasn't quite as obscure as Devil Is Fine, and the production was a bit more accessible. One man who is slightly more obsessed with Zeal Ardor than me is my man Duncan here, who has been patiently waiting for this new album.
Yeah, just a little bit.
You've been a keen fan for a while, as you've said.
Yeah.
You've seen them live.
Yeah, so like I will stress this at the front. I do not like the fact that about half of this album has already been released as singles before it come out.
6 singles, man.
Fucking ridiculous. Because once the album's out, there'll be another 2 singles and 8 singles in the band.
Yeah.
For an album, unless your name is The Darkness, that should never happen.
And saying that, the album is 16 songs long, so
Yeah, but do we need you got 16 songs? You don't have to release 6 pre-released singles
still got
before
10
the
to
album.
release. Still got an album's worth to release.
Well, we'll get into that. We'll get into that. Yeah, I'm a big fan. I have been a big fan since that first album. It's maybe the only kind of low-fly, kind of black metal-y modern thing that I've heard that I actually really like. Infamously, the band's sound came from a Reddit chat where he said, "Give me suggestions of what I should do for my next music project," and someone said American slave music and black metal, and here we are. The very, very first Zeal Ardor release, though, the one that he did before he fully committed to the old black metal sound, has a huge amount of kind of experimental pop stuff going on. It's fucking great. It's really, really, really well written with those kind of gospel soul style singing. Devil Is Fine, I think is a great album. I think it nails the brief 100%, but you're right, Stranger Fruit is where things took it took a step up. And I remember, I was going to say infamously, it's only infamously if you were me or Dave in that conversation, because no one else heard it. It wasn't documented anywhere. That I was like, give this guy half a decade and he's going to be fucking huge. I could hear it off that album. I'm like, there's something there. he has an ability to genre shift with ease on an album, and nothing feels like a whiplash moment at all. And he mixes so much in. And I genuinely felt like Zeal Ardor were going to be like the ghost of their particular genre, and that at some point everyone was just going to be like, "Oh, this is the band. This is the band we should be listening to." Yeah. And then I saw them live on that tour, and I was even more convinced at the end. They were fucking incredible live. Helps I saw them at Tuts. But they were absolutely incredible live. Minimal presence on stage, some gospel singers in the background. I think he played all the guitars. He had a bass player, drummer, and that was about it. And it was fucking awesome. And he's done an EP since. So he did an EP in between this, kind of leaning into the Black Lives Matter movement and kind of messaging around there. And a lot of that messaging is kind of carried over into here. The thing that I love about what he does is that he's not afraid to... And I remember reading like some fucking thing online where people were like, Zeal Ardor just really need to keep politics out of their music. And I'm like, it's literally black slave music as its core.
Yeah.
Which was all songs about overthrowing your masters and overturning your rulers. I mean, it's like that music is designed by its very nature to be anti-establishment, and the fact that, you know, because he's been a bit on the nose with his messaging, you don't fucking like it, fuck yourself, right? It's a lot of pish like that. Like, oh, I don't like politics in my music. Well, just stop listening to metal, rock, punk, like that. It's like literally that's what these songs are built on. Oh, only listen to Creedence Clearwater Survival. Guess what? They were rebelling against Vietnam, dickhead. I just can't. It's fucking a lot of shite, man. Leave it. Listen to Aaron Lewis talk about why we're in a fractured nation with his fucking wee whiny gritty face.
No thanks. I'd rather fucking grate my face off with a cheese grater than listen to that cunt. Jesus
That's
Christ.
What I'm right. But anyway, back to Zeal Ardor. Yeah. So he's always he's had that as a core, and that's carried through here. There's a lot of politicized messaging through the lyrics, which I think work really well. But this to me is a super exciting album, because this is the one that I think you get the best of that very first experimental pop album, with elements of the blackened metal from his first studio album. You get the craft behind Stranger Fruit, but then you get the personality of the man on this one. I think this album is so well put together, it's actually fucking scary. I find, whilst not one song on this album is exceptional, the placement of the songs is exceptional. I constantly felt, as I was listening through this, he was leaning at a little techniques you'd heard done before, but he was putting a different twist on it. So when you were getting the gospel singing, you were like, oh, right, this is a familiar element. It'd be followed up by something that was not familiar to how you'd heard it before. So it's almost like he's brought the greatest hits of his previous works into a room and created these little cards and then started shuffling them up. And the compositional work is incredible. Vocally, he sounds amazing. The dude is an exceptional singer. It's soulful. He's got that black metal scream thing down par. You can pull it out whenever he wants. And he doesn't actually overuse it here. I found even on Stranger Fruit, he used it a little bit too much in some elements where I was like, the guitars in that bit is enough that you don't need to do the vocal there. But on here, I think it works really, really well. Once again, the experimentation and the electronics, fucking mind-blowing. By the time you get to a track like Immersion, which is the fourth track, it just blindsided me with the way it all built up and constructed before hitting you with those blackened guitar elements. All the stuff we'd heard in advance, this is the kind of, as much as I hate how many singles have been released, it really does give you a good footing for how the album is, because none of the singles sounded alike, and to be honest, really none of the songs sound alike, and that should work against it, but actually works to its benefit for the most part. He's still, if my only criticism ever about Zeal Ardor, I think, is there's still maybe one or too many instrumental tracks in his release. It's a 16-track album. There's 3 instrumentals on this, and they're not placed in the opening track and the closing track. understandably them. There's one that comes in later on where I was like, oh, I'm not too sure about that, but it didn't destroy like my enjoyment of it. And actually, the musicality on it's really, really well. I just not entirely sure why it's there. But I did like it. So it's the weirdest scenario when listening to... Like, Zeal Ardor to me is almost... It's the... I imagine just like a really talented producer sitting down saying, I can do metal.
Yeah.
And then that's what it sounds like. It's just got all these elements that are so well crafted and pieced together. And it just so happens he can sing really well. The choruses, when they come in, are very catchy. The messaging is great. And yeah, he goes a bit German in there, which is kind of apt because a lot of black metal bands kind of like to go a bit German, of the Third Reich persuasion. And he doesn't do that, thank fuck. But that adds a degree of authenticity to the sound as well when you hear like kind of blackened German words flung at you. I think this is... it's one of these ones where like genuinely trying to pick it apart is very, very difficult, because it's so immaculately done. We recently spoke about Rollo Tomasi, and what I said about that is, you know, it was a band kind of finding all the elements and then constructing an album which showcased the best elements. That's kind of what we've got here. This to me is him finally fully comfortable with everything that he's got in his arsenal and delivering it all in an album. And I actually don't think there's one step here that feels, you know, like one step too far. Interestingly enough, I have done a bit of research on this one in advance, because I always, there's with certain bands where I'm like that, I need to test the mood of the nation, i.e. check the internet to see what other reviewers are saying. And it seems to be you either have now found this band and you've fallen in love with it, or it's just too much stuff going on an album for them. And I certainly, I fall somewhere in the middle of that, in that I already knew them. I love everything they're doing. And I can kind of see where you're coming from if you think there's too many elements, but to me that just makes it more interesting. Like, if you're going to do a 16-track album, if you're going to do that, Dave, if you sit down tomorrow and say, you know what, I'm doing a 16-track album tomorrow. If you're going to do that, the songs better be diverse and they better mix up. And if you can write music like this guy, why wouldn't you do that? Like, he's a master of, like you said, he's a master of all these different instruments, and he knows when to get the session musicians in to work off, and he's pulled together, I personally think, the best album that Zeal Ardor put their name to. And this is the one, to me, is the one that will fulfill the prophecy of 3 years ago, 4 years ago, 5 years ago, whenever I was like that. Give him 5 years and see what happens. This is it. Like, he has transitioned from playing tuts now. I think he could be very, very, very comfortably in much, much bigger venues with a crowd of fans that get it. And the beauty of what he does as well is you don't necessarily need to like the heaviest aspects of the music to really enjoy it, and you don't have to like the kind of saccharine moments on the album, but you're maybe more heavily inclined to really enjoy this album as well. It's kind of phenomenal in my opinion. But I have no idea where you guys are going to come in on this one. This is a segue. He's pulling a segue. I don't, because I don't think, out with us having a conversation about Stranger Foot 4 years ago, I don't think we've ever really spoken about Zeal Ardor out with that, and I ain't never spoken about Kyle with Zeal Ardor in a conversation. So a man who is in the home of black metal, who, let's just say, it rubs him the wrong way. So yeah, in summation, I think this is the best thing he's done. I think it's a great fucking album. Nice. Can't wait to spin this to death this year.
Excellent.
So, there we are.
Yeah, Kyle, what had you ever heard Zeal Ardor before?
I'd heard of them.
Okay.
I think through you two, actually, but I'd never heard them before. So I'm like, I was looking forward to listening to this one. And I got to say, like, what the fuck? There are things on this album that just on paper should not work, even in any... True. Whichever way the universe has evolved from the beginning up until now, whichever way that could have gone, this shouldn't work. But somehow we've ended up in the universe where it does fucking work. And I hate it and love it at the same time. It's a weird feeling. I'm dead in the middle between them both. I'm like, you've got gospel and black metal and pop and industrial. As far as I could count on my few listens through, and probably something else in there too. Bit of German speed metal, just a touch, mixed in with the black metal, and I'm like, this shouldn't work, dude. How have you made it work, you motherfucker? I don't believe it. Like, there's just parts in this, there's like expert use of like dissonance, absolutely piercing dissonance in the guitars halfway through one of the songs, and I'm just like, it's just so perfect. Duncan was right. Everything is absolutely perfectly placed on this album. I will agree about the instrumental tracks. It's like, yeah, okay, why? You've got such a great voice, you should be using it. Especially through the melodic gospel parts of the Slaver music. It was absolutely unbelievable. And then to jarringly put that right next to some black metal stuff and other types of heavier music was just, it blew me away because it just shouldn't work, but it did. And I was like, this is really disjointed, but in a very good way, and it works really well. And I just don't understand how he did it. I've never heard anything like this before. I've never even considered like putting those two genres together. Well, one genre I've never even considered making in my life. I've done a couple of black metal songs as a laugh. One was about coffee. It was hilarious. But like putting that together with most other genres of metal you can understand, but putting it next to the things you've got here, it's just, it's unbelievable. And then just with the way it works too. It's like it goes from dissonance, discordant, awful shit to really beautifully sung stuff and put together. It's just, yeah. Like, I might be gushing a bit. I think I'm a Zeal Ardor fan.
It's an enigma. It's like, because I've tried to get people into Zeal Ardor, and see, when you get asked that question, what did they sound like? You're like, they sound like Zeal Ardor.
Does that help like this out there at all?
No. Dave, you've been so cagey and so quiet, and I fucking hate it when he does this. And he knows he's doing it, and he knows he's upsetting me. Don't fucking hands up, motherfucker. Like, who? This guy? Me? Yes, you, Dave.
Where's this Dave of which you are talking?
Yeah, the floor's yours. Here at the big come down.
Yeah, well, I was kind of like you. Like after like 6 singles, I was like, is there anything else left to hear on this album? Really, like what can be left? And I was like, oh wait a minute, there's 16 tracks here.
Yeah,
and like, was it 14 tracks? Was it 14 tracks?
It's 14 tracks.
14 tracks. Stranger Fruits was 16 tracks. Sorry, that's where I'm getting mixed up. But Manuel said, what he said was, we have arrived at where he imagined this project should sound.
Oh, right.
This is what he kind of pictured.
I should really read the blurb before I make statements like, this feels like the most complete sound the band's. Yeah, I should really read all this shit.
Yeah. It's also the longest they've worked on an album. And I think that shows, to be honest. I think this is definitely the most consistent album of their career so far. I enjoyed Stranger Fruit. I think there was still parts of it didn't completely work for me. I didn't really have that issue on this self-titled. I enjoyed the kind of transitions from style to style. I mean, there's moments that are still like as mad as a box of frogs, but you know, with them kind of weaving in and out of metal and black metal and blues and soul and R&B and gospel, it's like, if variety is what you are after from your music, then look no further than this new album. But it's like, as diverse as this is, it didn't feel like directionless either. It does all kind of work, and I think that's partly down to the setup. Like, it's quite clever, because if you'd never heard Zeal Ardor before and you were listening to this album for the first time, the way he kind of sprinkles in just a little pinch of each style through the tracks. Yeah. You know, so then when he fully commits to a particular style later, like the black metal side, for example, it doesn't sound out of place. You know, because like the first couple of tracks after the intro, you've got Run and Death to the Holy, which are both like pretty full on. I got a kind of almost a kind of metalcore feel in the guitars, but they've got a kind of blackened tinge to them in some of the riffs and the lead work, and also the vocals, which are pretty visceral at points. But that kind of like soulful side of his voice is like blended in there. So when he does lean more into that kind of soulful gospel side later on in the album, it doesn't feel like it's coming out of nowhere. He's already set it up. And it's the same with the blackened parts, like tracks like Immersion, where they bring in a bit of electronics, which they'd used a lot more of in like previous albums, and they mix it with that almost like a post-black metal kind of chords and vocals. Again, it doesn't feel out of place because he's introduced those elements earlier in the album in much smaller doses. Particularly, I thought Immersion was brilliant. Actually,
it's like such a good song.
Just really like great execution of that style and blended with some really clever electronics. Not a lot of vocals on the track aside from like a few screams, but thoroughly enjoyed it. I agree with you, Duncan. I think his vocals are the best they have ever sounded. That kind of like soulful, like Delta blues style that he delivers, like on tracks like Golden Liar or Church Burns, like fantastic. And it's like it was really cool to hear his vocals really like work their magic on tracks like Golden Liar, which has really no heavy guitars at all. It's just him and that tone, and that track just demands your attention without the need for anything else. You know, there's some clean pick guitar, some percussion, but you're pretty much hooked in on his vocal alone, and that happens a lot throughout the release. Even when it's mixed in against like heavier guitars on Ease or Feed the Machine, which is like one of the more kind of riff heavy tracks, and the one where he's jumping between really like smooth cleans into these raspy like blackened screams. These melodies are fantastic, and actually on Erase, they were a little bit reminiscent of the guy John Carbone from Moontooth. Like the style, their tones are quite similar in the kind of the like melodic kind of stuff that they do. I thought this was another step up for Zeal Ardor. I agree. I think this is their best work to date. My only kind of criticism of this is I think there were a couple of tracks where the more kind of like metalcore-esque kind of guitar work, it didn't really do much for me. The riffs were a little bit stock at times. The track called I Caught You, which I just felt like was kind of lacking a little bit originality riff-wise. Luckily, Manuel's voice is always a highlight, so although there are tracks that were maybe lacking in something more like inventive from the riffs, his voice always delivers that something like exceptional, and when the whole band are firing all cylinders, it's brilliant. Like Hold Your Head Low, for example, is just that like that bluesy soulful kind of R&B verses mixed with that huge like black metal chorus or post black metal chorus. Like, as you said, Kyle, on paper you're like, what? That just fucking doesn't work. But then you hear it on the album and it's like flawless. Like, just how the fuck? I think to go back to the start, I think the production on this self-titled is the best they've ever sounded. The sound is excellent. It's clinical and it has some real kind of raw moments, but it's also like full of soul. And that's not an easy mix of styles to capture in one album. So hats off to Mark and Manuel and Will Putney as well for managing to put that across and make it sound cohesive, because it sounds great. I'm a little surprised that I'm this high on Zeal Ardor. When I heard the singles, I was like, I don't know how this album's going to work, to be honest. But you know, a very kind of varied selection of singles, but somehow they've made them sound like they're all supposed to be played together on this one album somehow. And it's very, very well done indeed. Thoroughly impressed and quite surprised at how much I enjoyed it, actually. Self-titled from Zeal Ardor, what are we thinking for the ratings of this album? Duncan, what are you thinking?
Currently a 4.5. I think by the end of the year a 5. I think I've spun this one because we got it as a stream, so that slightly for all the promoters out there, whenever you send me a stream, maybe not necessarily Dave, it kind of hampers the way I can listen to the music, which means I just can't listen to it on the go like I want to. So it's only had the 3 spins from me since we got the stream in. I can't find the fault in it. Out with, like I say, and they've always done it. He's always used instrumental tracks right from the beginning. He's had because he fucks around with Sims, so it makes sense that he's going to want to fuck around with Sims, and that's going to take its own thing. I'm coming in 4.5, but like I say, I genuinely think end of the year I'm going to be like, Yeah, this is slid its way into my top 10, and I'm now on a 5 for it. I think it's just such a cleverly put together album. It just kind of floors me. Not even just like the styles, like you guys talking about styles mixing. They all come from the same melting pot. Black metal, gospel. It all comes from the same pot.
Yeah.
So I think it's the dynamics that shouldn't work. Those swings and dynamics should be, and like at times, quite horrible to listen to. And that's the genius. That's what he's tapped into that no other musician seems to be able to do as well as him, is the way to link those things to the point that, like Dave says, you're tricked into thinking, oh, this always was supposed to go together. And that in itself, if it was just on that, it'd be a 5 fucking hands down.
Yeah.
But there we go. I'm going with 4.5, Dave.
Excellent. Kyle?
One of my favourite things about this album, it's got a song called Church Burns, and it's in no way a black metal song.
No.
It's like totally the opposite. So one of my favourite things is Expectation Subversion. He nailed it. So 4 out of 5 from me.
4 out of 5, nice. I enjoyed this way more than I thought I was going to be. I think, my only kind of real criticism, I didn't really have an issue with the interludes or kind of instrumental tracks. I just felt like some of the riffs were a little bit forgettable in a couple of tracks for me, but still, I'm going to come in at 4.5. I think this is a really good release, and I can definitely see myself going back to this. Definitely more than Stranger Fruit, to be honest. I think this is. I think it's like, even though there's like so many crazy styles, it's probably his most accessible album.
I think so, yeah.
And I think people that have never heard them before, it's probably a good place to start, to be honest.
This is the one that's going to propel him. And I'm just going to say, if you're listening to this review, get a gig booked in Scotland, you headlining, King Woman in support.
Ooh. Oh, that would be a gig.
Game over! That's what I do. I make dreams happen. Well, I put dream ideas out there for other people to make them happen. So there we are.
Like a dream weapon, Duncan. Like a
dream. Oh, Matt, if we can get Genghis Tron on that, and then maybe Author Punisher as well, I'll be jizzing my balls dry.
That's
what can be said, really? Zeal Ardor, new album's coming out on February 11th via MVKA. I'll put some links below to the Facebook, to the pre-order for the album. Check it out. Let us know what you think once you've heard any of the singles, any 6 of them, and let us know what you think when you hear the album. Happy to hear your thoughts and opinions on it. That is the review. Thank you for checking it out. Much appreciated. We'll be back with a new review very soon, but until then, take care. Speak to you soon.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.
Church